get everything going, I'm going to give a little bit of a background. We're going to have Lieutenant Robert Zuniga from the Pima County Corrections Department on with us. He is a 15-year veteran of the force, and he has some information that the sheriff of Pima County has been, at the very least, dishonest, and there's a lot of corruption going on, but there's a lot of misinformation being fed about the corrections officers and the vaccinations that are going on and who's responsible for the spread of COVID. So we're going to bring Robert on with us today, and we are going to have him here so he can tell his story and the story of the corrections officers, because right now Pima County is looking at reducing the staff of unvaccinated corrections officers by about 200 officers, and then to compensate would release prisoners back into the public population. So this is a very big deal. It's a very big safety concern. And right now, Regina Romero in the city of Tucson has an all-time high murder rate of, the last time I heard, I believe it was 92 murders. That was probably a week ago, so I don't know how accurate that is. But more than the murder count, Pima County has been harassing employees who are not vaccinated. Currently, there's a court case going on, and people are suing Pima County because they were charging them extra money for quote-unquote health insurance because they weren't vaccinated. This is a huge issue. It happened to my sister-in-law, and it's time that we get this information out there and start exposing the truth so that these officers who have been working faithfully, who worked diligently through COVID and weren't asked, to put anything aside that, they wouldn't already be willing to sacrifice. So now they're being threatened with their jobs, their livelihoods. They have families. I've talked to many of the families, wives, children, or, husbands. There are a lot of people that are affected by this. And most importantly, this is Pima County. This is in the district. This makes our county less safe. So I'm waiting for Robert to join. He's going to, I just got a message from him. He's looking for the request to join button. And let's see if I can add him here. So he should be a viewer. Robert, if you are watching, I'm going to try to add you here. I see McCall and Crystal and JJ and EG and Jeremy. Robert, are you with me on here? Are you logged in? Let's see. Just looking for Robert. All right, let's see. I see you on the screen, Robert, and Colleen, thanks for the Let's Go Brandon. With your vote or your voice, you stand in opposition of Biden and his terrible policies. So let's see. Robert, have you liked the congressional page? Try to click the join button, like the congressional page. Maybe there's something there because you may not be on there. All right. All right, Robert, you there? Thanks for sticking with us, folks. We're just going to work through these technical issues real quick. Hey Robert, when you're on the screen, give me a thumbs up. Thank you, Carla. I appreciate that very much, and I'm very happy to be supporting our men and women in law enforcement. This is for them today. We are working to get their message out so they're heard. And let's see. All right, here we go. Robert, you should be getting an invite. It says it's adding Robert right now. Robert, do you see an invite? Thank you, Sherry. Okay, it says the invite was declined. Let's try that again. All right, folks that are just joining us, we're adding Officer Zuniga to the call. All right, here we go.
All right, sorry for those technical difficulties. I started on my PC and there was no join button on
Good morning,
PC,
Robert.
so.
I am unable to hear you. Can everyone hear Robert? Type in the chat if you can hear Robert. Robert, do you have your mic turned on?
Yeah, I'm on my phone and
Okay.
it's on.
So for some reason I can't hear him. This is fun. All right. Well, thank you for our audience. And okay, well, Robert, I can't hear you, but I can see when your mouth moves. So what I'm going to do is I am going to let you open it up. Just give everyone a little history of your time in service and what you've been doing, and then we will get into it.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm clear. So everybody else can hear me, just you can't hear me. I guess we're going to have to use the texters to answer relay questions for us. Okay, so I think that's what he said, so I'll just go ahead and get started. So my name is Robert Zuniga. I'm a corrections lieutenant at the Pima County Jail. I've been there for a little over 15 years. My current assignment is in the medical services section, and I oversee all of the COVID protocols and data for the Pima County Jail. All right, since Brandon can't hear me, I will go ahead and just get started with you know, the information that I want to bring forward. First off, Brandon, you know, I want to thank you for having me on this video. You know, I have a lot of information that you know, that needs to get out there, because really the citizens of Pima County, the employees of Pima County, the Board of Supervisors have been told untruthful information from Sheriff Nanos. And you know, my ethics and morals no longer allow me to sit back and not say something. I've given, you know, my command staff, including Sheriff Nanos, every opportunity to, you know, correct himself or to redact some of the information that he told the Board of Supervisors. And to the best of my knowledge, he has not done that. And so I need to come forward and make sure that, you know, everyone is told the truth.
Okay, so I figured out my sound issue. For some reason, my mic was cutting off my speakers. So,
Okay.
All right. Just give me a recap real quick of what you just talked about.
Sure. So I introduced myself. You know, my name is Robert Zuniga. I'm a lieutenant at the jail. Been there for a little over 15 years. I'm in the medical services section. I oversee the COVID protocols and the data that we have at the jail. You know, I talked a little bit about I need to make sure that the citizens of Pima County, the employees of Pima County, the Board of Supervisors, everyone knows that a lot of the information that the sheriff has been putting out to them and the media is simply untruthful. When it comes to some of the stuff that's happening at the jail and regarding COVID at the jail.
Okay, and what are some of the, I'll let you tell your story. Go ahead and get into it. I know we've already previously talked about this, but tell the people what specifically Sheriff Nanos has lied about.
Sure. So first and foremost, Sheriff Nanos went to the Board of Supervisors on October 26th to address them. Some of the statements that he made to them and some of the items that he brought up with them were not accurate, were not true. So starting with the last inmate death that we had at the jail regarding COVID, the inmate, he was overdosed on methadone by a third-party vendor that we had. The third-party vendor essentially gave him too much methadone, which caused him to overdose. That overdose sent him to the hospital, and it wasn't until he was at the hospital that we discovered that he even had COVID. Unfortunately, the inmate did end up passing away. He had COVID in his system, and it was ruled by the medical examiner as a COVID death. But to really get into it, we need to talk a little bit about the history of that incident and the methadone at the jail. So after that happened, and I found out that the inmate was overdosed on methadone, I did some research and wanted to make sure that this wasn't more of a widespread issue than just this one instance. And so I looked at the history of medical emergencies that we've had at the jail from the beginning of January until the date when I did my investigation. And what I found was that there were 4 other instances where this third-party vendor overdosed inmates with too much methadone, causing them to go into an overdose. Now, fortunately, those inmates didn't die. We were able to provide life-saving measures, administer Narcan, and we were able to essentially save them. But this was an issue with this third-party vendor giving too much methadone to these inmates. And so I brought all of this forward to my chain of command and presented it to them. And as far as I know, to the best of my knowledge, there was never any type of investigation done regarding this third-party vendor and administering methadone in the jail. So, if it didn't rise to the level of criminal behavior where sheriff's deputies or detectives were, investigating the entire history of, overdoses that we had, at a very minimum, the DEA should have been involved because they hold the license for this third-party vendor. Methadone is a controlled substance. And so if something was off with this, either they're dispensing it improperly or it's poor training on their part, it's something that the DEA should have been involved in to really find out exactly what's happening with this third-party vendor and how they're overdosing these inmates. And so, that's the first thing that, I want to bring up is why is this kind of being pushed off to the side? This latest inmate that died of COVID, he was also one of these instances where the third-party vendor overdosed him of methadone, causing him to go unconscious and end up in the hospital.
So to recap, the inmate was overdosed by a third-party vendor, and this information was reported up your chain of command.
Yep, and I have I have email documentation that I'm willing to provide, showing that my investigation essentially showing that these are the instances and the dates and what exactly happened during those medical emergencies.
So what was presented to the Pima County Board of Supervisors as the cause of death for this individual?
So when Sheriff Nanos was speaking about the cause of death, he did mention it was COVID. The medical examiner did list it as a COVID death. He had COVID in his system. But what he told the Board of Supervisors, which was entirely inaccurate, is he started going down the path of saying that this inmate was in our facility for a good amount of time. He went through all of our COVID protocols. He was moved to a general population housing unit. He was around other inmates that had all gone through our COVID protocols. So everyone in that housing unit should have been free of COVID. And he made a statement that COs essentially gave this inmate the death sentence because he got COVID from a CO. That is entirely inaccurate. The housing unit that the inmate was in an observation unit. So every new arrestee that came into jail was being placed into this housing unit. And so we were watching them to see if they developed symptoms of COVID or not. This is by far the unit that if COVID was in our jail, it would have been in that housing unit. So for him to blame COs and say that this came from a CO is not true. That's simply a lie.
Do COs get to unilaterally decide on health and safety measures for the inmates?
So we have our COVID protocols in place. You know, we work in conjunction with the health department. And so these protocols of the, quarantine units, the observation housing units, we make sure that we're following their guidelines as best as we can.
But your higher command is aware of this, Pima County is aware of this, and if Sheriff Nanos is doing his job, he should also be aware of these policies too, correct?
Yeah, yes, exactly. And, he certainly should have been aware of what type of housing unit this inmate was in.
When I was in the military, Robert, it didn't matter, and you can go back and you can look at the incidents in Abu Ghraib, but when something to this magnitude happens, leadership was aware of the situation. They were aware of the protocols. They approved it. So the fact that Sheriff Nanos is putting this blame on the shoulders of the correction officers is totally abusive. It's irresponsible. And as a leader, he should ultimately be held responsible. So I believe it's criminal that he's going to the Board of Supervisors lying about the corrections officers in Pima County. So what else? So was there anything else significant about this inmate who passed away or any of the other inmates who have passed away recently?
So not regarding that inmate, but next what he went on to tell the Board of Supervisors is that he currently, and again, this was back in October, that he currently has an outbreak of COVID at the jail, and there's been a 500% increase in COVID at the jail. So that part is true. We did have a housing unit that ended up, one inmate had COVID. And so what we did is we tested every inmate in that housing unit, and multiple other inmates did end up testing positive for COVID. So the increase in COVID, sure, that part is accurate. Where he was inaccurate is he told the Board of Supervisors that we know that a CO worked in that housing unit and gave that pod COVID. The problem with that, and this was
anyone document this claim?
This is when he was talking to the Board of Supervisors. He told them this verbally. This was a general population housing unit. So again, he's trying to delineate between an observation pod. This is where COVID should be. General population pod. COVID should not be in those. The only way it can get there is from a CO. So the problem with his statements that he told the Board of Supervisors is the day before he went on to talk to the board, I emailed the Pima County Health Department epidemiologist regarding contact tracing. And I let him know that we did contact tracing. We looked at all known positive COs that had COVID around that time. And I let him know that we were unable to find any significant exposure for any of the inmates in that housing unit. And no COs that we know of that was positive for COVID worked in that housing unit. So him making that claim that we know it came from a CO is entirely untruthful.
Okay, and so, that's an issue. Right now we see Pima County, taking all these measures to force vaccinations on people. It's not just happening in the corrections office, it's happening in the health department throughout the entire county. And they're going to face legal action. I am glad that you guys are starting to get some national recognition and some news agencies are picking this up. Is there anything else specific about this incident, this inmate, that you would like to let the people know about?
So no, not regarding that inmate or that housing unit. But the next statement that the sheriff kept bringing up was that 42% of his COs test positive for COVID. And he's comparing that to the data from the inmate population in Pima County. And so he told the Board of Supervisors, I believe 43.5% back in October is what the data showed. So that number is accurate. I send that to him every single day. But I explained to the sheriff that you cannot rely on that number. And the reason I say that is that number is self-reported from the COs. So we're taking self-reported information from the COs, and then we're comparing it to factual data to the inmates. So what I mean by that is if a CO calls up and reports to risk management, yes, I tested positive for COVID, or no, I tested negative for COVID, it's all self-reported. Nothing is verified. We don't require any doctor slip or any test results, compared to the inmate population, which is all factual data. And so every test that the inmate gets is documented. Was it positive? Was it negative? So the issue you have with that is when you're taking self-reported data from staff, the only time staff is going to get tested is when they're feeling symptoms of COVID. So if there's, if they get a cough or, they get a fever, naturally they're going to want to know. So they get tested for COVID. So the positivity rate sure is going to be a lot higher when you think you have COVID compared to the inmate population, where everybody that comes into our facility is tested for COVID. Whether they have symptoms or not, they're tested. So yes, you're going to have some positives, but you're also going to have a lot of negatives because people aren't showing symptoms, they're fine. And, if we tested every staff member every day when they came in, our results would be very similar to, what the inmate percentage is. And so I clarified with the sheriff, we had a meeting with him and he brought that number up, and later on in an email, I broke it down for him and explained, like, sir, I understand that this information is sent to you, but you can't rely on, it's inaccurate to say that 43% of all COs that test are testing positive for COVID. And he did respond to the email, but all he said was, thanks, Robert. And he still used that data to make it seem as if the majority of COs test positive for COVID when they test.
So to recap the facts, you are following county approved guidelines. You're following the protocols that are put in place whenever an inmate or a CO tests positive for COVID. You're reporting those numbers daily to Sheriff Nanos, and he has gone in front of the Pima Board of Supervisors and at least lied twice as to the facts.
So yeah, the lies would be more, regarding the inmate that passed away and the housing unit that he was in, and the outbreak in housing unit 1 Papa, coming from a CO. Not accurate. When you get down to the percentages and comparing it, those numbers, that is what I sent him. Those are the numbers that he does see. But I broke it down in an email. Again, I'm willing to share the email that I sent to him, kind of, explaining why this isn't a good fact to present to the Board of Supervisors. So I wouldn't call that a lie. I would just say it's extremely misleading to present to the board.
Okay, and what other information do you want to share with everyone?
So, the other thing that, that I have is when we met with Sheriff Nanos, we talked to him about whether he should or he should not go forward with the recommending a mandate. And during that meeting, I was talking with him and I was explaining to him, sir, I understand that, you want to keep the inmates safe. We all want to keep the inmates safe. That's what we do every day. That is our job, is to keep the inmate population safe. And, he started talking about the vaccine mandate and, why he wanted it. And I explained to the sheriff, sir, if you do this, we could potentially lose a significant amount of officers at the jail. If you want to keep the inmate population safe, we have to keep our officers. And I told him, fentanyl kills way more inmates in this jail than COVID ever will. And if we don't have the staff members to properly watch the inmates, look after them, do shakedowns in the housing units, we're not going to be able to keep the inmate population safe. And so really, I explained to him the greater threat here is losing our staff. If your ultimate goal is to keep the inmates safe, keep your staff. And so in that meeting, he started getting very defensive. He started getting upset. He started raising his voice. He started cursing. And ultimately, he was violating Pima County workplace harassment policies. And so at that time, I started a video or an audio recording of it because, he was harassing some of my other coworkers in that meeting. Ultimately, he ended up, having a back and forth and cursing at the other lieutenant, kicking him out, yelling for him to get out of the room, and completely unprofessional. Not something that we would ever expect of an elected official. Certainly not something we would expect out of someone that we call a leader.
And so what proof of this is there out there?
So I had no intent of, doing an audio recording of that meeting. That wasn't my goal in mind. But when he started to violate Pima County workplace harassment policies, I felt the need to protect myself and my coworkers. And so I have an audio recording
of the entire interaction?
Yes. Starting from that point, yes, I have audio recording.
Well, so Pima County workplace policies have been violated. Sheriff Nanos has misled, at the minimum, the Pima County Board of Supervisors. I've seen statements that he's issued to the press that contradict a lot of this information. And so moving forward, what are you and the other correction officers looking at? What kind of situations do you face at work? And what are you looking at as far as a deadline for the vaccine mandate?
So, Brandon, the situation is already dire. We are at a point where COs are being forced to work overtime every other day, sometimes, back to back, being forced to work overtime. So it's extremely dangerous when you consider the fatigue factor. We have a very stressful job. We have a dangerous job. And when you're putting COs that have worked double shifts in a housing unit surrounded by 65, 70 other inmates, it's extremely dangerous. Currently, right now, to kind of help out with the overtime and the fatigue, all of the lieutenants are working as corrections officers. And so we're out there working on the floor. We're, relieving the officers and sending them home and trying to do our part to, kind of cut back on some of that fatigue. And, that really goes into the next part that I want to talk about is at the most recent Board of Supervisors meeting, Jan Lesher spoke, and she, mentioned that she's been working with the sheriff and, that they feel confident that they have a plan and, they essentially saying that they have a plan to deal with losing corrections officers. And that was outlined with, reducing the inmate population, through several different avenues. And really, as far as the jail goes, we do not have a plan to lose 150, 200 officers. We simply don't. If we're already at the juncture where we are forcing overtime back to back, you have your lieutenants working as officers already before anyone's gotten fired. How are we going to run this facility safely? And it goes back to what I told the sheriff is if we don't have the staff, we simply can't keep the inmate population safe. Inmate on inmate assaults are going to go up. Inmate on officer assaults are going to go up. And that will be an extremely, extremely dangerous place to work. And, I'll tell you, this is just my opinion and really the vibe I get from the room that we had, when we talk about the plan. None of the corrections lieutenants think that this is something that is going to work, something that's viable. We're essentially on a sinking ship right now, and we're doing everything we can to survive. And it's unfortunate, but we're not getting the support we need from our leader in order to make this work.
How long does it take from application for a corrections officer to be fully operational on their own? It's like going through any training and any side-by-side, anything like that. What's the evolution there of a corrections officer?
So really, we could talk about the academy and how much time they spend there, and then when they come out on the floor, and they do 6 weeks training with a CTO. But ultimately, it's going to take a year, their entire probation, to really understand the position and understand the job, and to make sure that they're performing, as a top level CO. One of the things that that they had brought up, I believe it was Rex Scott had brought up, was that he received confidence knowing that the sheriff has said that him and his command team have a plan in place to deal with this, to keep the public safe. Again, that's not true. None of his, and again, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for my coworkers. But again, just the vibe that I'm getting is, we don't have a true and accurate plan if we lose 150 to 200 officers. I'm just reading my notes here.
Sure.
So also we met with the captain, which is considered senior command staff. We met with the captain, and we were talking with the chief deputy and the chief of the Corrections Bureau, and all of us were kind of going over, like, what are we going to do? They were instructing us to come up with a plan, to come up with solutions. How is the sheriff saying that we have a plan when we're at a meeting? This was just last week. Hey, we need to figure this out, and we need to do something. After the chief deputy and the chief left, we were talking with the captain, and the captain, I was speaking with him, and I was saying, as the senior command, you guys need to go to the sheriff and tell him, we're on a sinking ship. You have to do something, or this is going to be extremely bad. And I learned at that meeting that they have. In fact, that at their last, it was on a Friday meeting that they had before we had our meeting with the sheriff. The senior command, which includes the chief deputy, all of his chiefs, all of his captains, went to Sheriff Nanos and told him, do not do this mandate. It's not a good idea. The captain confirmed this. He even said that his wife told him not to do this mandate, and he did it anyways.
Whose wife?
And Sheriff Nanos' wife. So
Okay.
The captain confirmed that all of his senior command told him not to do this, and he moved forward doing it. So, to me, this makes it all political. He's doing this for political reasons. I don't know what the agenda is, but it's not right. When 200 people could potentially lose their jobs, lose their career, you don't play politics with that.
I agree 100%. And for those who are just joining and getting on here, I hope that any news media personalities that are on here will take this, reach out to the lieutenant here. I am just providing an avenue for this information to get out. I care about your situation, and I want to help you in any way possible. What else would you like the public to know about this?
So just to talk about that informal meeting that we were having, with the captain when those statements came out. At that point, I lost all trust in my senior command, starting with the sheriff, berating us and yelling at us and cursing at us, that wasn't going to continue in future meetings. So I also have audio recording, of those statements that were made, regarding his senior command staff telling him, do not do the mandate.
Okay, we're getting some comments here on the video, and Bryn Nicole says, intent to terminate letters were given to officers in front of inmates. Are you aware of this?
Yeah, so I wasn't there to physically witness it, but yes, I was told, and I was told by people of my rank at the lieutenant level, that the captains were going into housing units and were giving notice of intents to terminate in a housing unit in front of inmates, also in front of other staff members. And that's basic supervision 101. What is the saying that you praise in public and discipline in private? That's the first thing that you learn. I've also heard from.
If this is true, this is wholly unacceptable.
Absolutely.
the fact that this happened, and I was an Army interrogator, so I have a little bit of real world knowledge of how certain things work. But you're a corrections officer, the men and women who serve with you are corrections officers, and you stated your job is to keep these inmates safe. Your job is to make sure that nothing happens to them. You mentioned doing health and welfare inspections, shakedowns, making sure that everyone is safe in there. And I can only imagine how serving an officer with an intent to fire would maybe provoke the inmates to disregard an officer's authority, to treat them with disrespect, and to create a dangerous situation. So to me right there, they're putting officers' lives and health and safety on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're drawing attention to really this crisis that the sheriff has created. He's letting through the captains, he's letting the inmate population know that we're in a crisis and we are potentially going to lose a significant amount of officers. And again, it goes back to it's going to be an extremely dangerous place to work. And I've also gotten reports from supervisors that work there that when the captains were in the hallway, they were holding a big stack of notice of intent to terminate, and they were laughing and joking back and forth of, wow, look how many we have. Do you think we're going to get done today? And laughing about it. You're dealing with people's lives. It's not something that you should do. It's unethical. It's immoral.
And for the people watching who aren't familiar with this, what is the deadline to get the mandatory vaccination or lose your job?
So December 31st is the deadline.
So in the Christmas season, which I think is a little bit irrelevant, but in a time where officers are being put in more danger, the public is in more danger. All-time murders, record high in Tucson. It's disgusting and unacceptable that Sheriff Nanos and the leadership in Pima County and the Pima County Health Department are harassing employees. It looks like we may have lost the lieutenant, but I'm going to put my information out there in the comments to this. I'm going to, you can go to my website, Brandon for Arizona. I have a petition out there for people to sign in support of the corrections officers and the men and women of Pima County. What I would say is please share this. Share this with everyone you know. If this frustrates and upsets and worries you like it does so many of us, I would say share this, make this known, make Sheriff Nanos infamous. And we have a duty to stand up to tyrants. We have a duty to protect those in our community that are trying to keep us safe. It's a joint effort, hand in hand, and I support every one of you. I want you to know that anything that I can do, I will do, and I'm here to facilitate helping you out. God bless you, and I will be in contact with the lieutenant even more, and we'll put this out there. So thank you, Lieutenant, for stepping up. You're brave, you're courageous. The fact that you have to do this, I understand why you're doing it. I can tell you're a man of integrity. You're looking out for your family and those officers that you supervise. And thank you very much for what you do, and all the officers who are online watching right now, and anyone being forced to get a vaccine against your will. God bless you. Stay strong. You're in my prayers. So take care, and we will see you soon. We'll be putting out more information.